Welcome. Really good to have this time with you. Thank you for being here. My name is Jonathan Foust. I will be guiding the following meditation and talk. And apologies for my voice. It's allergy season here in the mid-Atlantic, and the oak pollen right now is unbelievably thick. So thank you for bearing with me. A few announcements before we begin. First of all, a big thank you to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for producing this event. As well, a big thank you to our Mindful Movement teacher and teachers, and to Mindful Dialogue folks as well. We've got 3 wonderful movement teachers with a class at 6:30, which you can join. And then after the talk, if you like, you can join Mindful Dialogue with Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy. The movement before is a great way to prepare yourself for settling into meditation. You can blow off some of those deep-seated tensions and get your body settled. And then afterward, if you'd like to connect with like-minded people to share about the talk, share about your practice, it's a wonderful opportunity. These are all both offered by donations by wonderful folks. If you want to know more about how to join Mindful Movement and the Mindful Dialogue, you can check my web page or check Facebook, and all that information is there. A thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this event, and to my friends who I have not seen for a really long time at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington in Arlington, Virginia, which is the physical host of Monday Night Meditation when we're not under quarantine. So, hey. Also, just a thank you to you for your time, for your engagement, and just a gentle reminder that this is all offered in a way that no one is ever denied access to these practices and teachings. So it's offered freely. If you feel inspired to support this ongoing offering of these practices, please feel free to make a donation, gladly appreciated and accepted. And again, that's through my website at jonathanfaust.com. It's such an honor to have this time to practice, to explore different ways of paying attention, of waking up in life, and I'm deeply grateful for your support that allows me to do this and live the lavish lifestyle that I do. Our topic for this whole event here is about the art of starting again, which is a real critical part of the practice. And we notice, of course, when we start to pay attention, cultivating moment to moment to moment awareness, how moment to moment we're not here. And while that can be very frustrating, kind of having that in context and understanding the importance of starting again and the potential pleasure in starting again can be super, super helpful. So we're going to do some practice that's going to be primarily focusing on arriving, but we will take some time as well for broadening awareness, taking the seat of the observer, and some time at the end for resting in presence. So if you like, when you're ready with your cell phone unstun, you can close your eyes, and with your eyes closed, just sense how might your body like to move, adjust, adapt, kind of prepare for sitting meditation. Feel free to stretch in any way that's good for you. You might want to reach your arms up overhead, reach up, let out any sounds. Sometimes it's really nice to kind of tighten up your muscles. If you like, you might bring your shoulders up toward your ears. Just squeeze and hold, and then lower the shoulders. And as you begin to settle in, take some time just to explore what it's like to arrive, just to be here right now. Notice all the sounds around you. You might just sense for a moment, can you let go of labeling the sounds and just feel the sounds. Can you listen without any labels? Notice the temperature of the air against your skin. And as you sense through the skin, can you sense the humidity or the dryness of the air? If you shift your attention right now to the breath on the inside, where do you feel the breath? Let this be a time of shifting your attention from the outer world to this sense of softening and arriving here, being more aware of the inner world. And you might, as a way of inviting your attention ever more deeper inside, feel the breath and notice if you can lengthen and deepen your breath a little bit. It might be helpful to count the breath, just counting on the in-breath to 4 or 5. And on the out-breath, again, counting 4 or 5. And as you turn all of your attention to this movement of the breath, to matching the length of the in-breath and the length of the out-breath, notice what happens as you sustain your attention on your breathing. Feel all the details on the inside. You might find it helpful to sustain your attention on this slow, smooth, deep breathing. Or if you like, you might now release control of the breath. And sense, is it possible to sustain that feeling, the awareness of feeling of the breath on the inside? Much of this experience is about arriving. This felt sense of here and now. And you might, as I mentioned some body parts, let all of your attention come to experience the feeling from the inside. And sensing the scalp and the crown of the head. The forehead and temples. The little muscles around the eyes. And sensing the back of the head. And you might now bring the tip of your tongue behind your upper teeth, right to the kind of the hard palate. And if you hold the tip of the tongue there, notice if it might help you to relax your jaw. You may feel a softening, a dropping of the jaw. And imagine now that you could also soften the muscles of the face. Feeling the inside of the tongue, the space, the volume of the tongue, the volume of the lips, the inside of the mouth. And sensing now the base of the skull, the back of the neck. And is it possible to feel from the inside the volume of your shoulders and the length and the weight of your arms? The arms heavy, and sensing down through the elbows and down through the wrists. And feeling now from the inside, the palms, the thumbs and fingers. You might sense the space between your breastbone and your spine. And how delicately can you feel the breath moving here through the lungs? And sensing the diaphragm and the rib cage. You may notice as you soften, relax, and feel how the diaphragm will rise, the ribs flare out slightly on the inhalation and move inward on the exhalation. And sensing through your lower back, the buttocks. And you might bring your awareness to the abdomen, to around the belly, the navel maybe a little bit below, and you might hold your attention here and again soften and feel. And how delicately can you feel the breath here? The belly rising on the inhalation and falling on the exhalation. And can you now sense lower into the belly? And sensing the floor of the pelvis, the bowl of the pelvis. You might notice the distance between the hip joints. And as you sense the length and the weight, the volume of your legs, scanning simultaneously down the legs from the hip joints down through the knees. And the knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. And as if you could sense from the inside the soles of the feet and the heels. Is it possible to soften even more right now? And to feel what's here when you deeply relax inside. And very gently now, you might bring your attention to an anchor of your choosing. It may be the breath. You might explore the sense of the breath, the general flow of breath, or you might like to explore narrowing your attention. You might sense the breath right at the rim of the nostrils or the septum, or perhaps the belly. And you might like to explore another anchor, perhaps the sound vibrations as they're happening. Or perhaps the feeling in the palms or the soles of the feet. Whatever anchor you choose, let this be your home base. The mind will naturally come in with a narrative and move into planning and comparing and judging. That's okay. You might, when you wake up, let that be a moment of mild celebration. And then start again. Relax and feel your anchor from the inside. And from time to time, you may find it helpful to reset this inner space, relaxing your tongue, softening the muscles of the face. You might again sense the palms, the belly, and soles of the feet. And very gently, again, as you bring your attention to your anchor, you might explore this sense of receiving the sensations as they're happening, deeply relaxed. This sense of receptivity, and at the same time, this quality of focus, of relaxed concentration. What could relax or soften right now inside? How intimately can you feel your anchor from the inside? And you might sense from this inner place of softening, feeling, receiving, that you are also aware of the broader field of change, sensing the background beyond your anchor. And you might, as it feels right for you, explore from time to time what it's like to widen, broaden your awareness, noticing what's changing, and exploring what it means to let it be. And in these remaining minutes, You might again refresh your practice. Feel the face expressionless. Feel the weight of the arms, the weight of the legs. Sensing from the inside the palms, soles of the feet and the heels. Relaxed and alert. And at the same time, as you are present to this felt sense of here and now, aware and sensitive to all that is changing. And you might like to explore shifting your attention from this practice of gathering, of bringing awareness to here and now, inside, to exploring a sense of releasing any sense of control or manipulation, and to deepen and widen this inner sense of relaxation. And moving into a sense of being, of resting in presence. Is there anything right now that could soften or relax or let go? Nowhere to go and nothing to do. Just simply to be. And you might inquire again, is there anything right now that could soften, relax, or let go? And you might notice where you feel the breath on the inside right now. And if you like, gently lengthen the breath and deepen the breath. Noticing where you feel the breath on the inside. This inner state of deep relaxation and alertness. And beginning now to invite a little gentle movement, perhaps letting your head drift a little to the left and to the right. How might your body like to move or shift or change right now? If you like, you might reach your arms up overhead. Take some time for your transition. and welcome. I raise my mason jar of water to you. Apologies for my voice, which is somewhat afflicted with what I believe is oak pollen right now. I've always loved doing different accents. I've got a relatively good ear, and I'm very aware that in this day and age, doing anyone's accent has a potential of being offensive, and I do understand that. But I do want to share just two words as I recall them being said to me many, many times that was somewhat instrumental in my own practice. My form of meditation for many, many years was through transcendental meditation. And then I lived in a yoga ashram for many, many years. And at some point, as I was beginning to lead meditation retreats, I was offered to go and do a Buddhist retreat. So my very first Buddhist retreat was with S.N. Goenka. And those particular retreats are, they're very, very powerful. They're very orthodox. And that is to say, they're really designed to kind of give you like the very core, bare bones experience. And with them, you have a tremendous amount of discipline that you go through. You take the precepts, these basically the agreements of what you won't do. And some of those restrictions to support you are no reading, no speaking, no writing, no eye contact, no yoga, no form of exercise other than just a little bit of walking. And it's really designed to support you in going deep. And it's 10 days and it's 10 hours a day. It was probably one of the most brutal experiences of my life. For the first number of days, you're practicing anapanasati, which is a breath-based meditation. And you're narrowing your attention to the sense of the breath right at the rim of the nostrils, hour after hour after hour. After about 4 days, or after 4 days of that, you then move into learning a technique for scanning, which is quite powerful. But particularly in the beginning, with the mind just so on fire and having nothing to do, absolutely no distractions, I did find myself spontaneously reading the back of my toothpaste tube over and over again, simply to give my mind something to grab onto. That in these meditations, which were all recorded and guided by S.N. Goenka, there'd be these words, or these two words, that would just sort of come out of nowhere while you're sitting. And the words were something like this: start again. Start again. This invitation to start again. And so many times I would realize my mind was utterly, utterly lost, just completely down a rabbit hole. And the practice became about starting again. And that's what I'd like to talk about, because this is something that is so, so important. First, this practice of gathering awareness, how important it is. Second, I'd like to talk about the moment of awakening when you realize you're not here. Are there any ways that you can sort of like open up and amplify that moment? I think there are. The third thing I'd like to talk about is like setting the stage for presence and insight. How does that happen? Like, how can you do that more effectively or more efficiently? And then I'd like to talk a little bit about how daily practice is about a practice of recalibration. So this is a talk about practice and maybe about your daily practice. It's going to be really focused on starting again, some of the techniques for starting again in your practice. And then later I'm going to talk a little more about starting again in your life. But we're talking here primarily about the mechanics of meditation. So gathering awareness is the first stage of this practice. When I look back and I start sharing about like my early childhood impressions, I'm starting to sound like an old guy. Well, back when I was a boy, I grew up on a farm in southeastern Pennsylvania, and we had a black and white TV. Color TV hadn't come out then, and we got 2.5 television stations. ABC, NBC, and then if the winds were blowing right, we could maybe get CBS. And I think I think Star Trek was maybe on CBS. So I rarely got to see it. But I just remember this one episode watching with my little brother, where they had countered some race, and the whoever it was that they were in conflict with had this thing that they would do when they would bring their arms overhead and then they'd bring their hands down, and if they did this 3 times, they would have like incredible power. So 3 times of doing this. And so I remember at one point, I think this, alien dude was on his 3rd round when someone jumped on him and stopped him from doing the 3rd one, because he would have had so much power. And so, of course, my younger brother and I, for years afterward, would do this 3 times and then start wrestling. Why am I telling this story? It's about the power of concentration. When you're concentrated, and there's something about like those 3 movements was like, okay, total focus, gather your attention, and then you have access to something. And those days or those moments or hours when you're totally dialed in and focused, how much you can get done. I'm stunned for myself that when things are lined up and I'm relaxed and focused, I can get more done in 2 hours than I can in 8 hours. Attention is power. One-pointed attention can do amazing things. The classic example is you take a magnifying glass and you kind of run light through it, and you can burn a hole in a leaf. Laser is concentrated light, and you can cut through steel by taking this light that's available everywhere and bringing it to a sense of one-pointed focus. So this sense of focus and concentration and power, if you will, is foundational. It's foundational in life, and it's foundational in meditation. So there's an aspect, and it's only an aspect of this practice, which is about getting control of your attention. It's about kind of harnessing the wind and learning how to bring it to the here and now. It ain't easy, and it does develop over time. The classic teaching story is you're teaching a puppy how to sit. You say sit, doesn't no idea what you're talking about. You push her little bottom to the ground, say sit. She runs off immediately. Patience and persistence. The puppy starts to sit for longer and longer periods of time. And I must say, if you're training a puppy and you tell it to sit and it moves and you whack it, you're not going to have a happy puppy or a well-developed puppy. But patience, compassion, understanding, and resilience, the puppy starts to respond. And the mind, believe it or not, can start to respond. I'm always amazed when I do an intensive retreat of how in the beginning it's just paying dues. The mind is just so all over the place. But after some period of time, there is sort of a sustained sense of awareness, and you realize, my gosh, my awareness really is kind of like a laser. I can focus here and I can hold it here. And there are all kinds of things that develop out of that sense of one-pointed attention. I've talked a little bit about the jhanas, which are basically these different states you can begin to access by by harnessing and cultivating concentration. So this is really, really powerful stuff. And there's been a lot of studies now on meditation and how it can help with ADHD. This sense of focus and gathering, it thickens your prefrontal cortex, which is a part of your brain that's involved in focus and planning and impulse control. It also raises your brain's level of dopamine, which in many cases, in my understanding, is in short supply with a brain that's struggling with ADHD. So focus is good. And focus is hard. And we're trained out of focus and concentration in our culture. I was talking with a book agent about this book I've been wanting to write, and she said, "Well, are you wanting to write a book more like a philosophy, kind of a 50,000-foot book, or more of a how-to book?" And I said, "Well, I think it's got to be a how-to book." And she said, "Oh, good." And I said, "My attention span just isn't what it used to be." And she said, "Me too." She said, "I was a philosophy major and I love reading philosophy, but I just don't have the patience for it anymore." And maybe you've noticed this, like we're trained out of paying attention. And so having just been part of this retreat, the week-long spring retreat, it's always clear to me when I'm either supporting a retreat or certainly taking a retreat that the first couple days of practice are all about paying my dues. I'm aware of like the hypervigilance and the settling that's required, or I'm aware of how overstimulated and how exhausted I am and having to kind of fill the cup. I'm aware of worry and all the ways that I escape the moment. And so the question becomes, if you're wanting to cultivate this practice which can transform your life, we have to learn how to start again, because the foundational piece here, unfortunately, is about learning how to arrive and learning how to be here. And while some traditions really emphasize concentration and focus, others not so much, nonetheless, this is an important part of training your brain. So what do you do when you realize for the 1,000th time in your meditation that your mind is not here? So a couple things I've noticed is, as frustrating as it is, and like many, many people, there are times when I just want to get up and walk away because my mind is seemingly out of control. It's sort of an understanding. It develops over time and has to do with kind of a verified faith. This is how it works. You put in your time and you'll benefit. My initial, as I mentioned earlier, my initial training in meditation was transcendental meditation. So the anchor, rather than being a physical anchor, such as breath or sound or the felt sense in the palms or the soles of the feet, it's actually a mantra. It's an internal sound. And very wisely, their practice recommends 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. 20 minutes. And so for about 15 years, that's what I did. And that 20-minute period was very, very helpful because I was committed to sit for 20 minutes. And whatever commitment you make, what you think doesn't matter. It's all about kind of paying your dues. And of course, what happens is you begin to realize I don't have to believe every thought. And you realize that every time you let go of a thought, you're kind of letting go of some tension, and you're arriving. And the more you arrive, the more you're kind of developing the sense of mindfulness. You're developing your capacity for non-judging awareness. You're developing your capacity for this sense of non-preferential awareness. That quality of arriving is so profound. And so what I notice is that such a critical part of practice, certainly my practice, is that moment when you wake up, when you realize your mind is completely not here. In essence, it comes down to two options. One is to beat yourself up for forgetting your anchor. The other is to celebrate that you woke up. Now here, this is kind of an interesting thing because we can actually we can actually tap in to the science of forming habits. That if you want to make a change in your life, you want to create a positive association to the habit. I believe I told this story before, but my beautiful wife, Tara, was kind of reading a book on forming habits. And so whenever she would do her 10 push-ups and 10 squats in the morning, she did this little thing of like pumping her fists, like, yes. And so it seems so subtle, but that positive association, it kind of builds over time. And so she did this in all the little habits that she wanted to build. And we share a car, and she has this habit of not putting the keys back in the drawer. And so I was looking for the car keys, and I couldn't find them. And so I was back at my desk, and I texted her from my desk, and I said, would you mind, when you have time, putting the car keys back in the drawer? And so I was working on something very intensively, but I kind of, a little bit later, like 10 minutes later, I kind of heard her go down to the kitchen, and I heard the drawer open, and I heard the drawer close, and then I heard her say, yes. It was so sweet. But we can do this in meditation. When you notice the mind lost in thought, again, for the 1,000th time, how might you create a positive association with it? I don't think it needs to be pumping your fist, yes. But I know that there are some teachers that say, could you just offer like an inner smile, just a little inner smile, or a little bow to that, a little internal bow, like, yes. I know in TM they would sometimes say, like, imagine you're letting go of that thought like a balloon. You're just letting it go. Can you come back to a feeling of positive pleasure inside? So let's just take a moment. It might be nice to kind of reinforce this for a few moments. If you like, you can close your eyes, and let's just say for this next meditation that you're gonna focus your attention on right at the rim of the nostrils. Notice if you can just feel the breath there. Now, we're just going to hang out here for a little bit, but when you notice your mind moving away from your object of attention, you might just explore, is there a way that you can bring some positive association or some pleasure into that re-anchoring? Now, if you like, you can deepen your breath, and you can open your eyes or remain with them closed. Now, you may have been deeply absorbed into the breath for that little 45-second meditation, but I did want to reinforce a few things you can do. When you notice your mind lost in thought, you can offer a little inner smile. There you go. I'm back. I'm awake. You can also sense what it's like to kind of find a pleasant anchor or something pleasurable inside. One thing I'll do sometimes is I'll just take 3 slow breaths. So when I notice my mind is lost, and again, let's just try this right now. If you just close your eyes. Imagine you're meditating merrily along, and you realize your mind is just completely gone. Can you imagine a moment of awakening, like, I'm awake? And then take 3 slow, deep breaths right now. And on each out breath, can you relax? Can you soften and feel the aliveness, the juiciness of that sensation inside? And then again, if you like, you can deepen your breath. And if you like, you can open your eyes. So what if it was possible, and I'm not saying it is all the time, but what if it was possible to begin to re-anchor that moment of awakening in meditation as a celebration? You just woke out of the trance of thinking. You have maybe just a millisecond of actually being here and now. And is it possible to find some pleasure inside, to kind of soften on the inside? So what I will often do is like try the 3 breaths, just 3 breaths, re-arrive. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll soften my hands, which I find that's a really powerful anchor for me. If you relax your palms, the fingers and thumbs, and if you just sort of wait there, then you begin to feel some tingling and pulse. This is so foundational in practice, and it's so overlooked. And I'm one of the people who I want to get onto the insight stuff. I want to get onto the liberation stuff. But this is all so foundational. As I've shared many times, many teachers who teach about presence and insight and all that stuff, many of those people who teach from a deep place of insight have done a lot of concentration, focus, and arriving practice. So the sense of here and now concentration is enormously powerful. It is powerful. But there's more to meditation than just concentration, unless you want it to be about concentration. And again, if you're drawn to the concentration practices, they are just fascinating. The jhana practice, and I'll talk more about that sometime down the road. But concentration is really about setting the stage for mindfulness. It helps to set the stage for you to kind of access a sense of the witness or the observer or non-judging awareness or non-preferential awareness, however you like to think of it. And oftentimes, as I've often mentioned, there can be that moment where you have a sense of concentration, like you're sustaining attention on the awareness of breath. And then there's this sort of inner shift where you begin to notice, I'm aware of the breath, but I'm also aware of the background. It's like if you're concentrating a lens on a flower, you realize, okay, the flower is really, really sharp, but oh my gosh, in the background, there's all this light and texture, and that's all part of the composition as well. So that sense of being more and more aware of the background, and then being more and more aware of what's changing, and then being more and more aware of who you are as the witness, being more and more aware of the lens that you're perceiving through, whether that perception is clouded with desire or clouded with judgment or clouded with confusion, all that starts to get more and more clear over time. So we're setting the stage for this practice of mindfulness and insight. Now, I've always been fascinated by the anatomy of an insight. What does that mean to see more clearly? Of course, when you can get that inner alchemy, that inner stance where you are concentrated, relaxed, aware, you start to notice a lot more subtlety in your experience. You can begin to recognize what's referred to in Pali as papancha, kind of the proliferation of thoughts, the chain of thinking. Not that long ago in my meditation, I noticed myself thinking about, what am I going to do for my next talk? And I thought, oh, wow, well, I could tell this story. That's one of my favorite stories. I thought, well, when did I last use that story? Am I recycling stories too much? Am I getting boring? Am I coming to the end of these talks? Do I really have anything to say anymore after all these years? And I thought, I wonder how the podcast is doing. I really only look at the numbers once a year, and God, if I was done giving talks, what would I do if I didn't do this? And I thought, oh my God, I'm actually the age when my dad was retired. And I thought, well, he was pretty happy when he was retired, but the conversations kept going more and more back to the old days, and I don't want to be that guy. If I don't do this, what am I going to do with my life? And so this proliferation of thinking, and it started to get more and more of an emotional quality to it. Like, what am I going to do? And then I heard this voice. It was from a long, long time ago, one of my siblings saying, "You are a waste of space. You're such a moron." That little memory, that voice that played in my head, was suddenly this sense of like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with me. And then I noticed, as I kind of made space for that, I kind of recognized that, like, wow, here's this thought. There's something wrong with me. And then I could just kind of make room for it, and I kind of felt it, and I just thought about how that thought has lived inside of me for so long, and my essential anxiety that's been a big, big part of my life, and the busyness I have around wanting to cover up that thought. I've been an extraordinarily busy person, and just making room for that matrix of, there's something wrong with me, I need to fix it. I fix it by doing, I fix it by being productive, the needing to be a contribution. And I just started to bring some presence to it, just to see it, to offer it a little compassion, a little bit of empathy, to kind of sense that, that little kid who was so utterly anxious around wanting to be liked and wanting to be loved, and his strategies for getting what he needed. And I began to feel a sense of comfort. Sometimes I think this practice is sometimes almost like spiritual reparenting. And I began to feel a sense of peace. I began to feel a sense of possibility. I could almost touch into that sense of like that original innocence of the child. And then with that, I began to feel just a greater sense of ease, a greater sense of, this is what I love, and so much of my life, and how joyous it is, and how much I love it. And I just hung out with that feeling of so much ease and joy, and all the blessings of my life, the gratitude in my life. And then I thought to myself, I noticed this thought, like, what just happened? How did I move from such clenched anxiety to such a sense of gratitude and grace? And then the next thought was, how can I make that happen again? This is such a fascinating part of the practice to me. And I like to think that part of my capacity to recognize that the anxiety that was just playing through my thoughts, and to kind of sense what was under it, and to create that internal space for me to sense that old voice, and how that was planted in me many, many decades ago. It came from that capacity to arrive, to calm, to set the stage for the observer, to set the stage for that sense of preferenceless awareness, just to notice and allow what was there. The line between what we're aware of and what we're not aware of, somehow there had moved. And when that shifted and I could make room for it and I could allow the insight to arise, it was very much the fruit of all that work around arriving. So what is an insight? An interesting definition is it's the capacity to gain an accurate and deep intuitive understanding. How does it happen? Well, to my mind, for me to be able to shift from just being kind of lost in these circular thoughts that are generally anxious, to kind of sense what was underneath it, and then to kind of sense the kind of not about core, but like a very, very deep impression that was made. It's a shift in awareness. There's both the sense of arriving, being intimately present, but also being the open monitor to kind of look closely at what's arising and to kind of see if it's true. The interesting thing about the practice of insight is that you can't make it happen. All you can do is set the stage. And that means there's no forcing, there's no controlling or manipulating, other than arriving and starting again, then arriving. But when something does arise, whether it be physical pain, emotional turmoil, a strong mental state, the capacity to turn toward it. The classic story of having tea with your demons. When those energies arise, can you sit down and have tea? Can you get curious? Can you make room for what's there and listen deeply to what wants to be seen and heard and felt? So this quality of practice can be, in some ways, kind of therapeutic. Whatever arises in our practice, oftentimes the thoughts they're pretty insignificant. It's just the brain secreting thoughts. But sometimes some stuff arises in practice that can be very fruitful for investigation. To recognize it, allow it, investigate it, kind of nourish what you find with loving presence. And quite often we get to see all of our unmet needs. In that case, my unmet need for affirmation, and instead kind of believing that there really is something wrong with me. And that's why when we experience the challenges in meditation of anger, of disassociation, of hypervigilance or numbing or doubt or the ruthless critic, there are times in practice when we can actually turn to investigate that. So when it comes to cultivating daily practice, there are moments when things arise that can be very, very fruitful. And then there are moments where we're just simply kind of recalibrating the machinery. I spent some pretty happy years all through college and into grad school working on a farm in the Midwest. I just loved the whole life. We ran about 1,000 acres, and when it was planting season, it was all hands on deck, going really, really fast. The window for planting can be really, really short sometimes. So we planted corn and soybeans, wheat or oats. And we had this corn planter that at that time was cutting edge. When you're planting and you've got like a 6-row corn planter, or you're working with a grain drill, there's a lot of math to kind of figure out how fast you're going, and then the seed population per row. If it's off, you're wasting seed if you're putting too many in. But if you're putting too little in, then you're really losing money. And if one of the rows gets plugged up, it could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. And so much of what we were doing again and again and again was kind of recalibrating the planters, kind of making sure that all the parts were working and that everything was happening as it needed to happen. And I think sometimes meditation is about recalibrating the machine. Every time I sit, I'm just letting the detritus of the mind settle a little bit. And I've noticed for myself that when I meditate in the morning, and again, this is still a struggle for me. Meditation doesn't come easily to me. But I have noticed over the years that when I put in my time, whether that's 20 minutes or 30 minutes, usually I do 20 or 30, that over time there's a settling. And my little ritual is after I meditate, then I journal. There's some clarity in my journaling. And I pick out the 3 most important things for me to do. And oftentimes, again, that settling will allow me to really clarify what are the 3 most important things today, and then I can move forward. And I've really found, and I imagine to some degree you have found this, that you may be touching into a sense of kind of verified faith. That if you put in your time of gathering and arriving and maybe some investigation if that's there, if you put in your time, it'll be worth it. The science is in. The question is, what's going to support you in a practice that isn't necessarily fun? So, it's important to note that there's no practice that fits everyone. I remember the first time I went out to a month-long retreat and talking with Gil Fronsdal and told him I had just moved to Washington, D.C., and he was just musing and saying, if you're living in a stressful urban environment, just simple watching your breath may not be the most helpful practice. If there's a lot of tension built up, maybe some yoga would actually be helpful to kind of help settle the mind. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant observation, because I have found that as well. There are times when I can really benefit from releasing the deep-seated tensions rather than just expecting I can just sit, watch my breath, and get calm. So I like to think, as I've often shared, if you think of meditation as, this is an oversimplification and blasphemy to some people, but think of it in terms of the time you spend on focus, the time you spend on flow, and the time you spend on letting go. Focus is concentration, arriving, gathering. Flow is that sense of mindfulness, of noticing what's changing and how you're relating to it. And in flow, you're alternating between focus and going back into open monitoring. And then letting go is that time when you just simply drop technique and rest in presence. Part of dialing in your practice is figuring out the ratio. How much time is best spent on focus and gathering and calming and arriving? How much can you give to this sense of just observing without judgment? And how much can you dedicate toward the sense of just letting things go, letting things be? That recalibration is, I find, a really, really important thing. And what I've generally found is the more I spend on focus, on gathering and starting again, the more I'm setting the stage for a more gratifying sense of flow or mindfulness or letting go or letting be. That's kind of what works for me. Just a couple quick things in the last few minutes that we have here is to reflect on the importance of arriving, the power of concentration. That when you are here and now and you've gathered your attention, your mind can be like a laser. So honoring the importance of concentration, which means honoring the importance of starting again. Because if you try to be present, you're going to notice how you're not present. So explore if you can celebrate new habits. Is it possible? And I'm not saying it's easy. Is it possible when you have that moment of waking up, oh my God, I'm gone again? Can you create a new habit of offering a smile or an inner yes, or something that's really pleasurable, like 3 breaths, re-arrive and settle? Also, what will most help you in the sense of starting again is to find others who are practicing. Share about your practice. Look for the little tips and techniques that are going to resonate for you. Share your insights, share your discoveries. And this can be so, so helpful. The power of like-minded people. The mindful dialogue after this class is wonderful. The spiritual friends groups through IMCW, having some meditation partners. As you listen to others and as you share your discovery, it'll help to bring this more alive for you. The other thing that's very, very helpful is to really study how this meditation works. Just listening to talks that might point out some subtlety or give you a little bit of inspiration as you kind of dial in your practice. And perhaps the most important thing, if there is a most important thing, is to practice. It's one thing to read about all this stuff. Nothing will support you more than this physical practice of starting again, re-arriving, understanding that the foundation of mindfulness, this foundation of insight, the foundation of surrender, the foundation of awakening is your capacity to re-arrive and start again this breath. These sound vibrations as they're happening. That sense of arriving, softening, receiving the moment is what will help you to set the stage for cultivating that sense of the observer. Your capacity to open up the gap between stimulus and response. That will help to set the stage for everything that arises out of the present moment. I hope this has been helpful. For myself, I find it so important to kind of review the fundamental practices, because these foundational practices are what can help to set you up for true insight, true happiness, and opening up to a life of infinite possibility. So let's just we have just a minute. If you like, you can close your eyes. You might take 3 slow breaths. Notice where you feel the breath and sense, if you can, what it's like to receive the sensations on the inside. And you might sense, no matter where you are, no matter what is happening, no matter what you're feeling, in any moment you can start again. One breath. Gathering your attention in the here and now. And you might imagine in these final moments as you move on in your life, this ally of here and now, a re-arriving and resting in presence. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Many, many blessings in your practice. Wonderful to be with you, and I look forward to being with you again.